Today on Let Them Talk TV, we're answering two main questions. Where do English words come from? And is the core vocabulary of English Germanic, as these commenters never cease to remind me? We'll investigate that and find out if it's true. I did make a video covering some of this a few years ago, but in the words of the dude,
I've got information, man. New shit has come to light.
In other words, I've read extensively since then and I want to share with you some of the things I've learned. So join me as we delve deep into the stats of the English language. Yes, that's right, more stats than a statistician's convention on Staten Island. Be warned, it's going to get geeky, and with that in mind, let's go. Ich komme aus England.
Ich komme aus England.
Today's video is sponsored by Babbel. I'm going to Vienna this summer. I want to explore its history, its cafes, and do a tour of the locations of one of my favourite movies, The Third Man, which is all set in the streets of Vienna. I've got a flight, a hotel, and Babbel for learning German. It's one of the top language learning apps in the world. And what I like about Babbel is that you start having real life conversations right from the first lesson. You can talk about travel, business, relationships, and loads more. Babbel takes on the role of a personal language coach. Let's see it in action. Pizza kommt aus Italien.
Pizza kommt aus Italien.
Wir kommen.
Ihr kommt.
Sie kommen.
Lessons are designed by real language teachers, so the learning process all feels very natural and you'll be having conversations with locals in no time. Babbel offers a 20-day money-back guarantee, but I'm sure you won't need it. Click the link or scan the QR code to get 60% off your Babbel subscription. Now back to the video. When seeking the stats about the origins of English words, most people's first port of call is Wikipedia. So let's look at that. Here is their pie chart. Germanic 26%, Latin 29%, French 29%, Greek 6%, other languages 6%, and proper names 4%. The first thing I notice is that Wikipedia stats don't give each Germanic language its own piece of pie on the chart. Most Germanic words we use in modern English come from what linguists today call Old English. They were brought over by invading tribes who reached Britain mostly after the Romans left in 410 AD, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes and the Frisians. Indeed, the English language is classified as a West Germanic Anglo-Frisian language, but it's not the only Germanic language that gave words to English. Where is Old Norse? It's lumped together with all the other Germanic languages, but it's a language in its own right. Old Norse was a Scandinavian language, as you can see from this map. Old Norse is hugely important in the history of English. It's the language of the Vikings, the Scandinavians that ruled the large swathes of England for hundreds of years between the 8th and the 11th centuries. Their language shaped ours. They gave us the pronoun they. Also from Old Norse is are, as in you are, and sky and window and get and give and take and knife and hit. Also Dutch, it too had a significant influence on English. They gave us words such as boss, cookie, hustle, bluff, boost, snack, snoop, landscape and many more. Watch my video on the influence of the Dutch on the English language over here. But yes, they are both lumped into the Germanic section. It's in itsy bitsy little writing over there, just beneath Germanic. How unfair. You have to zoom in like 300% just to be able to read it. All right, fair enough. I forgive them. But just before we go, perhaps we should check their sources. Why is it that so many websites, articles and videos that discuss English word origins quote these same statistics from Wikipedia? Wikipedia is an encyclopedia, but it's not the Bible. It is fallible. However, one thing in their favour is that Wikipedia always put their sources, and that's great. So let's go ahead and check them. The source is the Shorter Oxford Dictionary of 1973. That's strange. Firstly, 1973. That's more than 50 years ago. But that's not such a problem. It's true you won't find, I don't know, words like cyberspace or smartphone or mansplaining in that dictionary. But read a book from 1973 and yeah, we've added some new words here and there and probably lost a few, but it's very much the same language. But what about the Shorter Oxford Dictionary? Have you ever seen it? Well, I own a copy. The Shorter Oxford Dictionary contains 100,000 entries and around 600,000 meanings. And if you buy it new, it costs £73. The average person doesn't know 100,000 words. And according to testyourvocab.com, an educated person knows about 20,000 words perhaps. Of course, it depends on the person. And the passive vocabulary might be around 40,000. So the problem with Wikipedia using the Shorter Oxford Dictionary as its source is that the vast majority of the words included in that dictionary are not known and not used by most people. And where do these low frequency words come from? It's true that some are local and regional words that are obsolete, but most of the words are highly technical, scientific and medical words. And which languages do scientific and technical words come from? They are heavily drawn from Latin and Greek. What this means for our statistics is that the percentage of Latin and Greek words will be inflated. So it doesn't reflect the English that most of us know. That's not to say that Latin and Greek aren't important, but those are not the words we use when talking to our friends or even in, I don't know, a novel you're reading or the editorial in the Guardian or the New York Times. They do not contain 30% of words in Latin. Using this huge number of words skews our perspective of the origins of words we actually encounter as English speakers. If I wanted to get an understanding of what foods English people eat, I'd probably analyse the diet of a few hundred people, maybe, I don't know, a couple of thousand, rather than look at every food item sold in Britain. I may be wrong, but I say that Brits probably eat quite a lot of bread and potatoes and baked beans, but someone somewhere will eat white truffles, plover eggs and Japanese pufferfish for breakfast. If that's you, then yeah, let us know in the comments. Anyway, what I want to say is that they're all foods, but should those obscure food items even be included in the stats? By the way, the Shorter Oxford Dictionary is not the biggest dictionary. No, as the name suggests, it's the shorter version. If you want statistics based on every word recorded in the English language, then that accolade goes to the daddy of all dictionaries, the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary. 20 volumes, 273,000 headwords, more than 600,000 definitions and 3.5 million quotations, available for £862 on Amazon, though you can subscribe online as that saves quite a lot of space in your library. Another thing to bear in mind when compiling these percentage stats: what is your definition of a word? I'll give you an example. Butter is a word.
What about the verb to butter? And buttered, the adjective? And buttery, and to butter up? So is butter one word or 5 words?
The is the most common word in the English language. Mondegreen is a lovely word. It means a misheard lyric. For example, in Blowing in the Wind by Bob Dylan, did he sing the answer, my friends is blowing in the wind? Or, as many people hear it, the ants are my friends.
The answer, my friend, is a blowing in the wind. The answer is...
In the song Purple Haze, did Jimi Hendrix sing Excuse Me While I Kiss the Sky or Excuse Me While I Kiss This Guy?
Excuse me while I kiss this guy.
About 5% of words on a page will be made up of the word the, whereas mondegreen is 1 in a million, and yet both count as one word. Now, how do you treat them in the statistics? Do you count the just once or every time it shows up? And the other issue we have with any list of the origins of English words is that a word might have an etymology from multiple languages.
What about orange? The English took it from the French, who took it from the Italian, arancia, who took it from the Arabic, who took it from the Persian, who took it from Sanskrit, naranga, who took it from Tamil.
So that's a linguistic world tour just for one word. And some words themselves have mixed etymology. Miniskirt. Mini is from Latin and skirt is from Old Norse.
And amoral. The a is from Greek, meaning not, and the moral part is from Latin. H.W. Fowler, author of A Dictionary of Modern English Usage, thought this an ugly hybrid. Don't mix your Latin and Greek. He preferred the etymologically pure, non-moral, but that didn't catch on. Etymological side note here, demos in Greek means people. Republic is from Latin, meaning of the people. So the People's Democratic Republic of Korea literally means the peoples of Korea.
Anyway, with those caveats, let's move to other sources. If counting words in a big dictionary isn't giving us a picture of our everyday language, what happens if we try to look at the words we actually use?
The source I've used for most of my videos is this, J.M. Williams, Origins of the English Language.
And his methodology was to analyse thousands of business letters. Clearly, this will give you a much closer indication of the percentage of words we actually use than the Wikipedia pie chart.
41% French, 33% Old English, also known as Anglo-Saxon, 13% Latin, and look, that small part of the pie in vibrant sky blue, it's 5% Old Norse. Welcome back, my friend. And that sliver in brown, Dutch is back with 1%.
Good to see you again. As you'd expect, there are fewer words of Greek and Latin origin. In fact, Greek has disappeared entirely. It's in the other 5%. This is not to say that Greek isn't hugely influential, but
the English and the Greek weren't really in direct contact very much until relatively recently, and that's why most Greek words or common Greek words
come via Latin or via French and are therefore not seen on the graph. It just shows how difficult it is to make these graphs.
Pause the video if you want to read the examples.
So, by the way, that other 5% also contains words from all other languages of the world. Just to give you a few examples, there's quite a lot of Italian in English. They gave us umbrella, espresso, bravo. From Spanish we get ranch, gorilla, patio. From Arabic we get admiral, algebra, jasmine. From Persian we get checkmate, from shamat, which means the king is helpless, I believe. Robot is from a Czech word meaning forced labour, and tsunami is from Japanese meaning a harbour wave. Then we get loot from Hindi meaning to rob, and tattoo is from Tahitian, and that's just to name but a few.
Surprisingly, there are hardly any words of Celtic origin from the indigenous peoples of Britain, but among the ones we do have are trousers, galore and slogan.
And that 5% also contains eponyms such as Kafkaesque, named after Franz Kafka, and Diesel, named after Rudolf Diesel, Silhouette, named after Etienne de Silhouette. Whenever I post a video with these kind of stats, I get numerous comments saying, well, French may have more words than Old English, but the core of the English language is Germanic. If you look at the top 100 words in the English language, 96 are Germanic. The exceptions, by the way, are use, person, people, just, and because, the cos part anyway. So on the face of it, it's true, but if you look deeper, you'll see that it's misleading. In English, and I guess in all languages, you have two types of words: function words and content words. Function words are the glue that holds the language together. The articles, the prepositions, of, from, over, under, pronouns, he, she, we, this and that, conjunctions, with and. Let's try and make a sentence from these function words from the list. With, about, of, under, am, the, from. Okay, that's not going to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. The content words are the words with meaning and concepts, the words we run our life by. Nouns like house, idea, coffee, pelican. Verbs like eat, think, create. Adjectives like big, happy, complicated. Adverbs like quickly, suddenly. If I say of, that means nothing on its own. If I say coffee, you can picture that. So in a sentence, do you fancy having a coffee at the studio this afternoon? Okay. But if I just say fancy coffee studio afternoon, that doesn't make any grammatical sense, but just with the content words, you can understand the meaning. But just using the function words, you get gibberish. Do you at the this? So to use a metaphor, because I like metaphors, content words are the bricks. You notice them first and they carry all the meaning. Function words are like the cement. They hold the bricks together and make sure the sentence doesn't fall apart. So yes, when people say 96 of the top 100 words in English are Germanic, they're mostly looking at the function words. You literally can't speak or write English without them. So we need to look at the content words, and if we do that, we see quite a different picture. And here they are.
Now we see that 23 out of the top 100 content words are from French.
Still mostly Germanic, but we don't only speak 100 words a day, do we? Let's look at the most common 1,000 words in the English language. This is still very much the core vocabulary of English. Words like open and place and high and turn and word and different. And this is from the GSL. It tells a different story. 47% from Old English, 38% from French, 9.5% from Latin, 3.1% from Old Norse. So you see what's happening here. The further you go down, the more mixed the origins of the English language become. We're still only looking at the most common 1,000 words. Let's dig a bit deeper. Let's look at another source, and this is taken from the Advanced Learner's Dictionary.
And it contains over 50,000 words.
So it's pretty comprehensive, but has fewer obscure technical words than the shorter Oxford Dictionary. So it should have fewer words from Latin and Greek. And indeed, Anglo-Saxon or Old English 27%, French 36%, Latin 22%, Old Norse 2.5%, and Dutch 1.6%. Another misconception that I hear again and again is that French words are somehow fancier than the Germanic words. Well, not really. That's only partly true. It's true that French words are sometimes chosen to communicate in a higher register. For example, when we say let's commence instead of let's begin. But there are so many French words in English that you'll hear them wherever you go, in the buzzing cafes, the supermarket queues, on the tube and by the office water cooler. They're everywhere. And I know I've said this before, but if you go through your old emails and look up the etymology of the content words, you'll see that it's usually about 50% from French. And here are some French words that are very much part of the core vocabulary of the English language. Really, very, please, push, number, just, long, large, change, place, move, moment, to name but a few. And in sentences, you may choose mostly words of French origin. For example, repeat, please, or Germanic words. Say it again. Words of mostly French origin. These are really difficult times. It's important to remain calm and do your duty. Or Germanic words. There is trouble ahead. You've got to keep your cool, whatever happens. You can make a sentence with a mix. And that's what people do every day. That's one of the beauties of the English language. Native speakers instinctively blend words of French origin and Germanic words seamlessly into sentences without even noticing. They are in tune with the rhythm and the cadence of the language. But most people couldn't tell you the etymology of the individual words they use.
So to answer the question, is the core vocabulary of the English language Germanic? Well, 96% of the top 100 words are Germanic and 77% of the top 100 content words, but of the 1,000 most frequently used words, only about 50% are Germanic. So based on the evidence, I'd say not really. It's very mixed and a bit meaningless.
It's like saying the core ingredient of mayonnaise is oil. Well, yes, that's true, but if you take away the egg, it's not mayonnaise anymore. It's just fluffy oil. And English vocabulary has many ingredients. Anyway, that's the what, but perhaps we should just take a brief moment to look at the why. Why is English vocabulary divided like this? English is a Germanic language. Although there is probably some influence from French, as I talk about in another video here. However, the vocabulary is a different story. The French-speaking Normans invaded in 1066, and for 300 years, French was a language of power. By modern standards, Anglo-Saxon had a relatively small vocabulary. When new words were needed in the language, they were taken from French. Words about the economy, about cuisine, about the military, about administration. Indeed, economy, cuisine, military and administration are all French words. Not only that, but as French was the language of prestige, English speakers borrowed a lot of their everyday words from French. That is why we say please and not ik bidde, and really and very rather than sweether, and we say number instead of yetal. So in this Middle English period from 1100 to 1500, we see a huge influx of French into English. That's why Middle English is quite a different language from Old English. The French language from Paris was the language of prestige, even after Norman French ceased to be the language of the nobility in England. So French words kept pouring into our vocabulary. What about words of Latin and Greek origin? Well, the Anglo-Saxons had already adopted a number of words such as school and church. The Normans used Latin in administration and proclamations. So some words come from that period, but the vast majority of Latin and Greek terms you see in the shorter Oxford's dictionary arrived much later, from the Renaissance onwards. In terms of volume, most of the brainy words in English came through advancements in science and medicine, and they're still pouring in. For example, we think of Latin as a dead language, but not completely true. Just look at the ingredients of a shampoo bottle, it's all Latin. And with each discovery of a new plant, bug, or isotope, we get another English word from Latin. If you're interested in the history of the English language, then do sign up to my newsletter, The Rambler. It's free, the link is in the description, or become a patron for exclusive content. Have a beautiful day. Bye.